Good evening and welcome to a very special episode of The Buck Stops Here. I'm Vishnu Shom. Just 5 months back, a 22-year-old officer of the Indian Army, Lieutenant Ummer Fayaz, graduated from the National Defence Academy. He joined one of the most distinguished regiments of the Indian Army. He joined the Rajputana Rifles. He went home on leave just a couple of days back. He said he wanted to attend the wedding in the family. He was abducted from this wedding and he was shot dead by terrorists. His bullet-ridden body has been recovered. A lot of people are asking, why did something like this happen to a 22-year-old Kashmiri man who was going home to his own village? This is perhaps the first time since 1991 that a serving officer of the Indian Army has been killed by terrorists when he's on leave in Kashmir. It's not just many across the country who are devastated at the loss of this brave officer. His regiment is deeply shocked by what has taken place. We are very honored to be here at the Rajputana Rifles Regimental Center and to be with 4 men who till just a few months back trained this young lieutenant. They worked with him and they have an idea of just what he was as a man, and we are very privileged to be speaking to them. I'd like to introduce them. Major Avdesh Chaudhary, thank you very much for being with us. Major Yuvaveer Kadyan sitting to my right. Subedar Nazruddin, thanks very much Nazruddin Saab for being with us, and Naik Mohammad Adib Siddiqui sitting on this side. I just want to go first across to you, Major Chaudhary. Your first memory of this brave young 22-year-old, full of josh, fresh NDA recruit. What is your first memory of when you saw him over here?
Lieutenant Umar got commissioned in December 2006 in the 2nd Battalion of the Rajputana Rifles, and after the commissioning for initial 15 days, they were with us in the regimental center, basically for the young officers orientation cadre. I was the OIC of the young orientation cadre, and during this orientation cadre, I observed him, and I found him a very young, dynamic, smart, and go-getter person who was looking forward to serve his nation.
He always had a smile on his face, I'm told.
And during the interaction, when I asked him, what was that which brings you to join the army? He highlighted certain important facts, that he has always has a passion for the army. He wants to serve his nation. And more importantly, the important factor he brought out was that despite all the terrorist activities in the valley, the young youth of the Kashmir valley, maximum of them want to join Indian Army.
Yeah.
And this speaks about the work of the army as well, and the officers' inclination towards the nation, the army, and of course the regiment as well.
सूबेदार साहब, ये बताइए, आपका उमेर के बारे में कुछ बताइए, आपका एक मेमोरी बताइए. जब वो पहले यहाँ आए थे, आप उनको ट्रेन कर रहे थे, किस ट्रेनिंग में आप लगे थे?
मैं सूबेदार नजरुद्दीन, रेजिमेंट सेंटर, मैं WT इंस्ट्रक्टर हूँ. जब यंग ऑफिसर कमीशन लेकर आता है तो यहाँ पर ओरिएंटेशन कैप्सूल चलता है 15 दिन का, जिसके अंदर हम इंस्ट्रक्टर से और रिक्रूट से उनका मिलाप करते हैं. और साहब का फिजिकल अच्छा था और सपोर्ट्समैन भी साहब अच्छे थे, जिससे कि हमारे साथ वॉलीबॉल खुश रहते थे, वॉलीबॉल खेलते थे, बास्केटबॉल, जो भी गेम उचित साहब
आपने भी खेला उनके साथ
हम भी खेले साहब,
क्योंकि काफी हॉकी भी खेलते थे
साहब, खेलते थे,
पर वॉलीबॉल भी जरूर.
और
आपका ये मुझे बताया गया कि 2 राज्य में काफी लोग वॉलीबॉल खेलते और बास्केटबॉल खेलते
सर,
और वो उसमें काफी अच्छे थे,
काफी अच्छे थे, और फायरिंग में भी अच्छे मार्क्समैन थे. फायरिंग में बहुत रुचि थी.
Major, he had a very humble background, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
He was the son of apple farmers.
Apple farmer, yes, sir.
And tell us a little bit about what you know of his background, where he came from.
He was a very humble person, very down to earth, and I over here was in charge of the sports and the physical aspects of his introduction. And as and when he came here, we had a match of volleyball, and in a court you can easily judge a man's character. So it was during that volleyball match wherein you could sense that this is a person who's a go-getter. He's not afraid to take the ball. He's not afraid to take the chances. He's confident. But yet, at the end of the match, when everything went away, he was there to shake hands. So he's a very friendly, jovial, a very pleasant and pleasing personality.
You know, what strikes me is a lot of people asking questions that why wasn't he armed when he went home? Why did he not have an escort? And to a lot of people, why would you need an escort in your own state, in your own country to go to your own house? In Kashmir, when officers and Jawans go on leave, they aren't armed. They've never been armed, right?
They're never armed anywhere when they go on leave. And secondly, in the recent history of the Kashmir conflict, there has never been a situation where a serving or a veteran, because there are a lot of veterans in the Kashmir Valley as well, who have been targeted like this. So this particular act is a very cowardly act committed by these people, and it just further strengthens our resolve to fight terrorism and eradicate it.
नायक साहब, आप फायरिंग में काफ़ी मशहूर है, आप इंस्ट्रक्टर हो यहाँ, तो जब वो आपके पास आए ट्रेनिंग के लिए, फायरिंग के लिए, तो क्या ड्रिल्स थे, उनके बारे में कुछ बताइए।
मेरी पहली मुलाकात उनसे फायरिंग रेंज पे हुई थी, तो एक अलग सी चमक थी उनके चेहरे पे, आंखों में चमक थी उनके, तो खुश रहते थे। मैंने उनसे पूछा भी था कि साहब आप बहुत खुश रहते हो, क्या बात है? तो बोले कि मेरा सपना था बचपन से कि मैं इंडियन आर्मी के अंदर ऑफिसर बनूं, और मैं ऑफिसर बना हूं, इसलिए मैं बहुत खुश हूँ। ठीक है, मैंने उनकी फायरिंग कराई थी, ड्रिल बहुत अच्छी थी, फायरिंग बहुत अच्छी थी उनकी। मैं फायरिंग देख के शौक भी रह गया कि मतलब यंग ऑफिसर्स हैं, बिल्कुल अभी आए हैं, और इतनी अच्छी फायरिंग काफ़ी अच्छी थी, और मतलब बिहेव बहुत अच्छा था। हम लोग से इतनी जल्दी घुल मिल गए थे, लगा ही नहीं कि अभी यंग आए, बिल्कुल अभी आए, बिल्कुल जल्दी से घुल मिल गए थे। और अपने बारे में काफ़ी हमने पूछा भी था, कश्मीर के बारे में, आप वहाँ से
क्या बताया था आपको?
मतलब वो बोलते हैं कि वहाँ पे ज़्यादातर लोग अमन पसंद करते हैं, अमन रहते हैं। कुछ लोग हैं जो कहते हैं पाकिस्तान की वजह से, किसी वजह से यहाँ पर गतिविधि गलत काम कराना चाहते हैं, लेकिन बाकी वो खुश थे। बोले कि मैंने सेकेंड राज्य में कमीशन लिया है, बहुत पुरानी पलटन है, बहुत अच्छा इसका इतिहास रहा हुआ है, तो मैं कुछ कर गुजरना चाहता हूँ, इस देश के लिए कुछ करना चाहता हूँ। उनकी थिंक बहुत अच्छी थी।
Major, you know, this, and you know this much better than me, but your regiment, it goes back several hundred years in terms of its history. You fought before the First World War, you fought in the First World War, the Second World War. In Kargil, as a young reporter, I was actually covering to Raj Rif, the same unit that he was a part of, and they won Toroling for us. The one thing is that you are trained as an officer that if you fight and you die, it's one thing. It's an insult to be abducted and killed in this manner. Would you agree?
Certainly not. I mean, it can happen with anybody. He is ultimately a human being, and when he is on leave, he just want to behave like a normal human being. So, but definitely I would like to say that we condemn this act, and this should not be done, at least in the integral part of the country. We strongly condemn it, and those who have been behind this, they definitely will be getting a befitting reply in the best possible manner.
In a situation like this, keeping the morale of the men up is also important. You've lost a young officer, and that also a very friendly young officer. That's also part of your training. Is that something that really kicks in a situation like this? When you lose anyone, officer or a Jawan, anybody?
Definitely, it's a sad day for us that we lost a brother officer, but definitely it will not shaken our morale. This regiment has a tradition, a history of several hundred years, and it definitely binds us together to resolve and to fight these perpetrators.
Yeah. He used the word brother, and I think that defines the ethos of the Indian Army in so many ways. That sense of camaraderie that you saw this young lieutenant have with the men around him. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this camaraderie that you're talking about, it was very simple for him because of his attitude and his nature. He was very forthcoming. He was never shy of taking up any responsibility or volunteering for anything. He was never shy of asking questions. Even though he was an officer, I would have seen him twice, like how he mentioned that his drills were immaculate. They were immaculate because he's not afraid to ask questions. He's not afraid to approach people. And this brotherhood that comes, that does not come overnight. It comes once you've bonded with the men, once you've stayed with the men. And that is precisely why once the officers get commissioned from the training academies, they come to their respective regimental centers. Because it is over here that the amalgamation happens. So they were as a gentleman cadet there, they were groomed into an officer. Now they've come here, they've seen how the recruits, their men are trained. Yeah. So this 15-20 day period that they have over here, this is an amalgamation where they become a complete regimented soldier. Yeah. So this is what brings out the esprit de corps, the camaraderie, the bonhomie, the brotherhood.
Yeah. नाइक साहब और कुछ बता सकते हैं उमेर के बारे में जो आपको याद आए?
उमेर साहब का मैं साथ एक दिन मैं गेम भी खेला था उनके साथ.
क्या खेले?
वॉलीबॉल खेला था. उनको वॉलीबॉल पसंद थी, ठीक है ना, खेलते थे वो वॉलीबॉल. तो मतलब स्पोर्ट्स में काफ़ी इंटरेस्ट था उनका, खेलते थे. तो मेरे साथ वॉलीबॉल भी खेले थे एक दिन वो. तो अच्छा लगा था उनके साथ रह के. मतलब एक यंग ऑफिसर आया और इतना घुल मिल कर है तो काफ़ी अच्छा महसूस होता है.
जी. Did he beat you in volleyball? Or did you beat him?
We were on the same team.
I asked that because he played for NDA also in hockey.
Yes,
that must have been an absolutely crazy standard of hockey because wearing NDA colours is a huge achievement. Tell us about that achievement.
That is a very big achievement. Anybody who's in the academy team for any sport, he has left behind thousands of cadets, and he's the select few. So that is where that pride came from. That is where that zeal that we talk about, that you're hearing everybody talk about, that he had that zeal in his eyes, that chamak that they mentioned. Yeah. That chamak comes from years and years of polishing. And that was easily visible in whatever that he did. He spent 15-20 days over here, he left a mark. And I'm very sure that everybody who's known him and had the privilege to know him would think the same about him.
One or two last couple of questions. The battle goes on. You lose brave friends. You know, you sometimes lose soldiers who you know nothing about. But it's a battle, and it's this loss in a difficult place, Kashmir, and that goes on. You will not stop for a moment doing what you're doing, right?
Yes, definitely not. We have a well laid out plan just to fight the ongoing situation, and definitely we have been groomed, we have been trained,
and his sacrifices will never be forgotten.
Never. This nation, this army, and of course this regiment, we are with the family in this grief situation, and we are indebted to him and his family for his supreme sacrifice which is made for the nation, and definitely he will be remembered for years.
All right, so he's going to be remembered. He's going to be remembered for years. That's the message, I think, that the Indian Army wants to send out today. A 22-year-old, fresh out of the National Defence Academy, just coming into his own as a young officer, took leave, went home, and that was the last time that he is going home. It's a tragedy beyond words, but a reflection of how the situation in Kashmir is. It's a constant challenge, it's a constant threat, but these men, all his trainers, and at one level his brothers, say they will continue to fight, they will continue to struggle day in and day out. So for the first time in decades, an Indian Army officer, while on leave in Jammu and Kashmir, has been murdered by terrorists. Is this part of some sort of new messaging that terrorists are doing, and what really should be the counter to that? Joining us now, General Bikram Singh, the former Chief of Army Staff. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. Anuradha Bhasin Jamwal, the Executive Editor of Kashmir Times. You're also joined by Wahidur Rahman, the spokesperson of the PDP. General Bikram Singh, I'd like to come to you first, sir. This is a concern because the army draws thousands of recruits from Kashmir itself, and a lot of them go back home, obviously, every few months. But if these Jawans, and in this case an officer, is targeted, what do you believe, sir, needs to be a response? A change in strategy, perhaps, of some sort?
Well, Vishnu, this incident actually only shows that the fear of the gun has increased. And firstly, let me start by saluting this young lad of ours, young officer who's, breathed his last, who's given the ultimate sacrifice. He was on leave, he was killed by the terrorists, a sad incident, highly condemnable incident. But yes, let me tell you, the operations must carry on as the way they are carrying on. What I feel we are lacking today is intelligence. What we are lacking today is local support. And when local support goes away, this is what happens. You know, you could make out the fear which was there in the family. Despite the incident having occurred last night when he was abducted, till this morning, the family didn't go and inform the police or the army. This only goes to show the kind of fear which is there in the environment. And as part of our operations, we have got to restore the confidence of the people in the army, in the security forces. And that can only be done once you generate real-time intelligence, you get requisite boots on ground, and you carry out operations which are people-friendly, which are surgical, based on hard intelligence. And that must carry on. Because at the moment, I can make out, it's very evident that the terrorists have an upper hand. They are able to intimidate the population, which at the moment is not forthcoming in terms of intelligence, which is very, very much required to neutralize the terrorists.
General, you know, something that's now been happening for quite some time is that when the army is carrying out anti-terror operations and the like in the front, then from behind very often they get pelted with stones by these protesters. So in a situation like this, how does the army actually fight? You know, a sub-unit involved in anti-terror operations is being targeted from two sides. How do you counter that as a young army commander on the ground?
You see, Vishnu, this is on account of radicalization. This is one very important contour of the security environment today in the valley, that the radicalization has increased, where people are coming in hordes and supporting the terrorists and trying to intervene between the operations being carried out by the army to neutralize the terrorists. I think what needs to be done is that we got to evolve our strategy. I've written one or two pieces on this, where, mind you, we've got to be people friendly. We cannot afford to be ruthless and very harsh with people who are intervening. After all, they are doing it. Some of them, I agree, they are doing on behalf of the terrorists. Some are motivated by ideology, but I think more of these people who are coming in to intervene and interject between the operations are those who are doing under intimidation, under pressure of the terrorists and fear of the gun. So we have to carry on with these operations to neutralize. There's no way of letting these operations go. But yes, where the women folk come in, where our people come in to intervene, they have got to be taken care of through the Code of Criminal Procedure, where I mentioned once or twice earlier, we have a template on this count. We get the SDMs involved in the columns that are going out for operations. Let them requisition the army on the spot. And the army thereafter gives a warning, tells them stay away, otherwise we'll fire at you. And you are using minimum force to neutralize these people. And trust me, you fire a couple of volleys and these people will run away. But yes, we got to change our methodology. But ultimately, we cannot afford to let go. It's our state, our people, our country. We've got to make sure we change our tactics, we change our standing operating procedures, and we make sure that we can further our operations. And I think in this, the entire thing is fear of the gun. You take it from me.
Okay, General, thanks. I want to go across to Wahidur Rahman, the spokesperson of the PDP. Would you like to react to that? The General Bikram Singh, a distinguished soldier, former army chief, suggesting that in some situations the army might be obliged to fire because it's the fear of the gun which in some situations might actually restore peace. How do you respond?
Well, I think we need to really understand that we are in a situation where Jammu and Kashmir, we are in conflict with our own people and we are not at the line of control. And second important thing I wanted to say that, this act of today's, it's not only cowardly, but it tells you how inhuman, militants have been in this act of violence by, killing a soldier without gun. It doesn't, it doesn't say a big story about militancy and all these things. There's a lot of support. I just heard General Bikram Singh saying that there's lots of support. There's a lot of support for the peaceful contest. There's a lot of support for the police and security forces as well. But we really need to understand the rules of engagement. Yes, there is a shift in situation. A lot of things have changed, but we have to distinguish between a gunman and a civilian. We always have to distinguish between that. And it is, if you have got...
But how do you actually, do that? Isn't that the main problem? Wahidur Rahman, isn't that the real problem? How do you distinguish in many of these cases between a terrorist and who is not a terrorist?
I think we need a massive reach out at all levels. We need a massive reach out.
Right? He was surrounded by people who he knew, and yet he was abducted. So in a situation, how do you differentiate between who's a terrorist and who's not?
I think we need to engage with our own people at a massive reach out. We need to start with the youth at security level, at political level, at the social level as well. And important, if we want to create an irrelevance for the militancy, it's important to involve people in the political process through dialogue and reconciliation, which we have been continuously saying. We are not against, I mean, you have to fight the gun with a gun, there's no doubt in that, but at the same time we need to we have to understand that we can't create relevance for militancy, and by engaging continuously through the security, we are only creating relevance for security like scenario, and also creating relevance of the militancy. It will always neutralize the mainstream forces, it will always neutralize the moderate voices in Kashmir, including the separatists. My point is that we are in a very different situation. There's no doubt that this security forces are working under tremendous pressure, because the definition of friend and foe is not clear at a lot of places.
I want to go across to Anuradha Haseen Jamwal. Anuradha, let me ask you this. Do you believe that the targeting of this army officer was deliberate? It was a message being sent out by terrorists that they're going after officers and perhaps Jawans of the Indian Army? Because we've seen them target Jawans of the police in the past. Is this part of some sort of messaging that is happening?
It's very difficult, Vishnu, at this moment to say with certainty what the actual game plan was. But apparently the gunmen and the militants have gone into that house with full information of where he was sitting and, you know, handpicked that person. But the entire thing, before jumping to conclusions, I think would call for a probe. The greater point that we are missing is that we need to stop this vicious cycle of violence. It is not just security men getting killed, it's not just security men on a holiday or the policemen who are getting killed, it's also civilians who are getting killed on a daily basis. And this brutalization of the Kashmiri society, this needs to stop. And there can be military aspect, military handling of the problem is only one aspect of it. And I agree with Wahid, where he says that there is need for dialogue, there is need to reach out to the people of Kashmir. So that political process is missing. We have a desperate situation in the valley today where, when militants are operating, people come out in support of them and start pelting stones. We have a desperate situation because there are people being killed, people on all sides getting killed and brutalized, and the valley is sinking into a deep chaos, and which is not good for rest of the country as well. We need to understand all this. How much bloodshed will it take for New Delhi to wake up and initiate a process of dialogue and talks?
All right, I think that's a very important point, and I think we need to close this program on that. How much longer before some sort of genuine process of engagement, of talks actually does take place? But as we look at that, let's not for a moment forget about the sacrifices of the thousands of Jawans of the armed forces who are there day in and day out, trying to do their jobs, trying to protect us, trying to ensure the territorial sanctity of our country. And let's not for a moment forget about this young 22-year-old officer of the Indian Army. Fresh out of the National Defense Academy, he went home for a wedding. He was abducted and he was murdered. We're out of time on this program. Thanks for being with us.